Hi, this is Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens, where I review fountain pens and I talk about art. And it's a place if you are interested in fountain pens or think you might become interested in fountain pens. Don't forget to subscribe if you find this at all useful. Today I'm going to just do a brief video talking about the difference between the Jinhao 100 and the Conklin Durograph. These are two pretty popular pens. They are both, I think, largely made in China. I mean, the Jinhao 100 is entirely made in China. The Conklin pen doesn't say where it's made. In some ways, it implies that it is made in Toledo, but of course, Conklin has not been in Toledo since the 1950s. A company, I think in the early 2000s, bought the Conklin name and is making all kinds of fountain pens that harken back to the earlier period of Conklin's. They look like some of Conklin's pens, but they have a different. Each one of them looks different. They work differently. So they're kind of an homage, and they use a lot of the branding, particularly the idea of Toledo, or they have a pen that's called the All-American. But in fact, I think their pens are largely made with elements from Germany in terms of the nib. I believe they use Jovo nibs now, and much of the pens are made in China. And their Durograph looks a lot like the Jinhao 100, and both of those pens look a lot like the Parker Century pen, which in fact looks like the earlier Parker Duofold. And I've talked about this, lots of people have talked about this whole issue of pens that are homages. And I think if you look at, I've sort of assembled a whole bunch of pens, both by Parker and Jinhao and Schaefer, and you see that this so-called kind of flat top, round pen, right, has been with us since the 1920s, and many different versions of it. So I think it's kind of crazy to accuse the Chinese of cloning Parker, original, because in a certain way Parker itself is copying themselves, and these different pen companies have changed so much over time. So the real question is about value, and you can get a Jinhao 100 somewhere around $20. It depends on where you get it, if you get it on Amazon or if you get it on eBay and it's sent from China. The Conklin pens are not much more expensive, but can be at least twice that much. It depends on, again, where you get them. They tend to be discounted a lot. So their retail price might be, anywhere up to $70 or $100, but I have seen them sold as cheaply as $30. So what are you getting for that extra money? Is it worth it? Now, one thing you definitely get with the Conklin brand is a really beautiful presentation, a beautiful box. And with Jinhao, you get a much more bare steel metal box that isn't as nice as the Conklin box. I mean, the Conklin boxes are some of the nicest boxes that you get with under $100 pen that I know of. And that makes a very nice gift. So when you're thinking around Christmas time, you want to give a nice pen. The Conklin pens also really are beautiful looking. They have a whole range of different finishes. There are subtle variations in terms of the cap versus the way both the Parker looks and the way in which the Jinhao looks. So there are subtle differences in terms of the look of the pen. I would not say, though, that the Conklin pen is better made, particularly than the Jinhao pen. And here's an interesting difference. Now, when Conklin first was doing its pens, I think decades ago, or when they first started up, so in the last 10 years, they've gotten a lot of criticism for the quality of the nibs. I believe, I'm not sure, but I think that the nibs were originally sourced from Bach or wherever the nibs were coming from, there was a lot of variation in quality. And sometimes you get a good nib, sometimes you get a bad nib. They have switched to Jovo. And in the case of the amber Durograph that I got, though, recently, the nib was not so great. I had to kind of work on it to get it to write well. Both Jinhao 100 pens that I've gotten in the last month have really nice nibs and work really, really well, much better than earlier Chinese nibs. It used to be that Jinhao pens only came sort of in extra fine nibs, but now that you can get them in medium. And the medium nib, I feel for both the orange version, or you could say that that's red, that really harkens back to Parker Duofold, and this lovely sort of yellowy orange version of the pen. Both write really nicely. The nib that I got in the amber version of the Conklin wasn't quite as good, but I worked on it and I actually was able to get it to work fairly well, and I like it. It has a bit of a feedback. How do these two pens compare? Well, the first thing you notice about them is they're very similar in size. The Conklin Durograph is maybe a touch longer. You can see that the Jinhao 100 has a bigger band, right? And also, actually, the band of the Jinhao goes all the way to the end of the cap, which makes a lot of sense in terms of protecting the cap, while the Conklin doesn't do that. They both are made of really nice, I think, acrylic. They look really nice. They both have this sort of black tops, and they both have a section that is black. They both use number 6 nibs, but you could, so you actually could take the nib out of a Conklin and put it into Jinhao and vice versa. I've taken the pens apart a little bit, and you can see that both the Jinhao 100 and the Conklin Durograph have these nibs that are in holders that screw in and out of the sections. They are not interchangeable, but if you take the nib out of the holders, they would be, because they both use number 6 nibs. But this is a special Conklin, I think it also works in Monteverde pens, holder for Jovo. It's not the standard Jovo nib holder, and this is a holder that works with Jinhao pens. It might work with Handian pens. I'm not sure. Other Chinese pens, but it won't. It's not These aren't interchangeable, but they're very, very similar. You can see that both pens use converters. One difference is, and I think this is something that's better on the Conklin, is that the converter on the Conklin screws in and out, while the Jinhao one just pushes into the pen. And I actually like the ones that screw in and out. So they compare in terms of weight. This is the Conklin, and it is 26.2 grams with the cap. And this is the Jinhao, and it is 27.7 grams with the cap. Another difference is the cap tops. Get this to focus. Jinhao has put their sort of three-dimensional branding on the top, which is nice and gives it a kind of vintage look. Conklin has this their logo, and it says Conklin established 1898. And this, if anything annoys me about Conklin, it probably is this sort of idea that somehow or other the same company that started in 1898 is making the pens that they're making now. This is just really a fantasy. It has not been in continuous production, right? So maybe they're trying to evoke the older Conklin, but there really isn't anything of the old Conklin in the new Conklin, right? Except for kind of desire to emulate what Conklin used to do. And so I think all this branding is silly and actually ultimately tarnishes the brand because it makes it seem like it's something it's not. How do they write? Okay, so this is the Conklin Durograph. It is medium. This is Waterman Intense Black. And now, the truth is, when I first got this pen, it was a bit scratchy, and I actually worked on it a bit. It's still, you can still hear the feedback, but I think now it writes nicely. And in my experience, I have had several Conklin pens where the nib had to be returned to get a new nib. So they have quality control issues that supposedly are better now. I recommend if you are going to get a Conklin pen that you get it from someone who's an authorized dealer so that they can get you a replacement if you need it. This is nice wetness. So it's working quite well now. I actually like it a lot. And it does post. It's just a little less easy to post it than the Jinhao is. Here's the Jinhao. It's also medium, and this is Waterman. Tender purple. It is also even a little bit more wet. And right out of the box, it wrote very nicely. Less feedback, but some. It's nice and smooth. If I didn't know better, I would have thought this was a Jofo nib. So that's a big improvement over the way that a lot of Chinese nibs were. Quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. So out of the box, Jinhao won this competition, but now that I've worked on the nibs, they're very comparable. Neither of them are, I didn't test the Conklin, but I wouldn't use either of them as reverse writers. So, what would I say? I think it comes down to how much you care about the box. If you want a really nice box, then that's something that's good about the Conklin. It depends on what you think of the way the Conklin looks. It looks a little different. It is. I particularly like one of their yellow pens. They come in a whole range of different styles. And that's one advantage of the Durograph. They have a kind of greater variety, I think, than than the Jinhao 100. The Jinhao 100s also come in many different colors, right? But the Conklin seem a little more varied. So it's a matter of taste and what they look like. But definitely in terms of value, I would say the Jinhao 100 is a better deal. I think the box that it comes in is fine. I mean, actually, you're not really going to use the box if it's for your own personal use anyway. So a lot of people I know just throw the boxes out. So there's no doubt in my mind that the Jinhao 100 is a much better deal than the Conklin pens. The Conklin pens, I think, are a good deal if you can get them heavily discounted, which you sometimes can. I would not pay full retail for the Conklin Durograph. I hope everybody's having a great holiday, and don't forget to subscribe.